Jamie Osborne just asked me what they were, but that's the beauty
There they
of
are.
this programme. You don't want to give your guests too much advance warning because it will just quell their natural spontaneity. Quite a few of them this week as well. We'll try and be as quick as we can. Nevin Truesdale's exit from the Jockey Club as chief executive. He goes in December, Cornelius.
Yeah.
Who's going to replace him?
Well, who's going to replace him? We don't know. Is it surprising? Probably not, because the rumour mill has been doing the rounds a lot in recent times. On the one hand, Nevin Truesdale, who had been the head of finance, ex-British Gas, has been successful on the financial side of the Jockey Club for a long time, became the main person and has done some great work in the true spirit of the Jockey Club, leading British racing since the mid-18th century when it comes to animal rising last year. He did a lot of good work, affordability checks, a lot of leadership there. But on the business side of things, there's a lot of difficulty there, particularly surrounding the Cheltenham Festival. Numbers down there in terms of crowds, prize money contribution by the Jockey Club being cut this year. A lot of criticism of the structure of the Jockey Club as well by members. So it's probably unsurprising that he has gone.
But if you're going to replace him, or he wants to be replaced, or whatever, however that's panned out, as an organisation, you've got to be thinking, right, well, where's the better option?
Well, there is an alternative rather than I don't know what
the alternative option. And what are they looking for that they're not getting at the moment?
Well, just before we come on to that, just a thought about the Jockey Club, where it's about to have a new chairman because the senior steward's about to hand on to Lady Harding. It's got the chief executive on his way out. A certain amount of uncertainty about the leadership of Cheltenham. The head of group purchase went this week as well, I saw on LinkedIn. So there's quite a lot of turmoil there at the moment. It's a difficult time in terms of who comes in. Did I read somewhere that you're about fourth favourite?
You can make that 1,000 to 1. In fact, really? 10,000 to 1. Let's talk serious candidates for a role like this, Jamie. Someone with commercial heft, understands international racing, and can actually run the racecourses efficiently and properly.
Look, it's tough, and maybe this will be a catalyst to a bit of change within the Jockey Club. I think, look, they fundamentally do a really good job. I mean, through the training centres that they own and manage, they do a great job. But at the end of the day, what are the Jockey Club? They're running 14 racecourses. They don't, it's not owned by anybody. It doesn't have shareholders to answer to. It has a royal charter that says it must give back its profits for the good of racing. But I think there in itself is a problem. If you compare the structure of the Jockey Club to the structure of ARC, where there is an absolute necessity to give a return to the shareholders, has something gone wrong in this business? They're issuing profit warnings and it's all seems a bit panicky at the moment. Is something gone wrong in this business because it's not owned by anybody, because there isn't that absolute commercial determination. For example, losing World Pool races, that must have impacted enormously on their revenue. Why have they done that? Why has that happened? And look, I am all for the Jockey Club, but I'm not totally certain. For example, why is it called the Jockey Club? It owns 14 racecourses and runs 3 training centres. Nevin, I think, has probably been, had a very difficult task.
Well, I always thought with him, people talk about bad elections to win and what have you. Of course, you want the top job if you're in the job, but he's taken over in circumstances that were very difficult because there was a lot of rancour involving the previous CEO. He's had the
then COVID came
along, where he took over in the middle of COVID, middle of the pandemic, right smack in the middle of it. Then you've got a cost of living crisis, inflation rocketing, meaning the cost of running these racecourses is going through the roof. The post-COVID spike and then decline in racecourse attendances. You're having to contend with an awful lot of things that any CEO wouldn't really want.
But then
that's not to say there aren't areas for improvement. Of course there are.
Well, and obviously the Cheltenham thing, which is so important, not just to the Jockey Club, but to British racing as a whole, because it's become this cash cow. There's a feeling that there hasn't been perhaps as much flexibility, as much sort of concentrating on development and looking forward in terms of Cheltenham as perhaps there should have been. And maybe he slightly paid the price for that. And also, you know, look at Epsom.
Yeah, well, let's roll around. Let's start the clock again on this, because you know you can talk about Epsom and the Derby numbers. Well, we touched on this last week. They weren't released. When they were released, Cornelius,
about 27,000.
They didn't tell us a great story, did they?
No, they told a pretty bad story. And without meaning to go on about Worcester, which I was talking about earlier on the same day they managed 10,000 people.
Did they?
So they got 10,000 people at Worcester on the same day, admittedly the reopening and its latest day there, that Epsom could only get 27,000 on Epsom Downs. And those are pretty stark numbers, aren't they? You know, in terms of the Derby, you know, put the Derby's profile to one side, but people aren't coming to Epsom, aren't wanting to come in the way that they used to be. And so the product that the Jockey Club is putting forward at Epsom and is putting forward at Cheltenham is not as good as it could be.
And of course, I mean, I don't want to compare too much with entities abroad, but there are other countries in which racing is not particularly close to the national consciousness, or is losing its place in proximity to the national consciousness, who on the big event days are still making a big event. We are quite good at big events in this country, but Derby Day is no longer a big event.
Yeah, I mean, potentially it could be one of our biggest days of the year. And again, I don't want to sound too negative against Jockey Club racecourses, but I went there with owners this year and it was a disappointing experience.
In what way?
Not enough space for them. Everybody was pushed into a tent sort of way beyond the winning line, and it was way too cramped. And it was your usual poor bar service, which now we're getting used to on every racecourse, not just Jockey Club racecourses. Which, you know, it's all about cost, isn't it? You know, having to use people on race day that probably aren't very good at what they do. You know, pouring a drink is seemingly quite a difficult task on a lot of racecourses. So, yeah, what should be a showpiece day for us, and if you're taking clients there, should absolutely be right up there with one of the best days, probably wasn't.
But of course, notwithstanding the myriad of issues that beset British racing that we talk about so often, you've also talked about its prestige and the fact that it can still attract people to spend an awful lot of money. No outfit more than Wathnan, which is the brainchild of the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim. His advisors, his senior advisors, Ollie Tate, and in this country, Richard Brown, have been assembling this team of horses for Royal Ascot and beyond, Jamie. Hartem is one of them, Lope de Lilas is another. There's any amount of others, and probably more to come, and all these two-year-old breeze-up horses. What do you make of this as a burgeoning operation? We've seen what the Maktoums did in the 80s. We've seen other Qatari concerns come and stay and diminish or go up, whatever. What do you make of this one?
Oh, I would imagine this one is here to stay. I mean, remember, Al Shikab were doing something similar, you know, 10, 15 years ago.
This seems on a slightly bigger scale.
This is, yeah, it sounds like
this is the Emir, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, there's very deep pockets. Makes it very hard for those of us that are competing in the same market. But on the other hand, if we have a horse that, you know, is good enough to be bought by Wathnan, they seem to have a policy of leaving them with the trainers unless they're going to go up to Qatar.
Got anything that might be of interest to them at the moment?
Hopefully I will have in the next few months. Yes, I'd like to think so. And obviously,
never want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, there's that big sort of scramble pre-Ascot, which is understandable. Historically, the Wathnans of this world are only positive for the industry. You know, we have to accept that, you know, if we're trying to do something similar and buy horses that are showing promise, you know, we're walking into a gunfight with a water pistol next to them. But hopefully it'll last. Hopefully it'll be, and the whole industry can benefit at some stage.
I'll tell you that there have been all these 2-year-olds. It's almost been confusing trying to keep track of the 2-year-olds. One that really caught my eye, trained by Carl Burt, was Leovani,
the Nottingham filly.
Yeah. And yesterday's horse clearly is the one at Beverley. Is clearly a major player. They could be well represented.
Not according to Jamie Osborne's vet, but
yeah, but they could be well represented, couldn't they, in the Norfolk Stakes? Because Shadow Army is that not Norfolk?
Yep, that's gone to Wathnan now.
Yeah, that's
and
gone.
Electrolyte, who won up at Air of Archie Watson's.
Yeah,
the Goslins and older horses. The Goslins got Torito as well. That's
Gregory, of course.
Yeah.
Rogue Lightning.
Chartash.
Yep, keep them coming.
Yeah. So it's a big plus, isn't it, for British racing that they could be investing in all sorts of places, but they want to be investing here. So that's the big, as Jamie says, that's the big positive.
I think the key is, Sheikh Mohammed comes into the game in '77. Prince Khalid Abdullah comes into the game around about the same time. If they're not shown the experience they want fairly soon, they're not going to keep going and going and going and building up the empires they built. Now, had it not been for Gregory and Courage Mon Ami winning at Royal Ascot last year immediately after their sale, what would be the scale of this now? I suggest it would be significantally smaller. So you've got to get in. You've got to get in with a result, haven't you?
Well, it would be very disappointing if they, had an ordinary first year and then that was that.
But it's a big shove forward by having the good first.
Yeah, it's going to open the purse strings a little, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it took Sheikh Mohammed a while for
things really started.
Rolling.
Brighton, 19.
But isn't the most significant of their horses at the moment Remarque, who's just been retired with a serious pedigree? Now, if they start breeding from her and start building a breeding operation...
No, we don't want them to do that.
Why not?
No. You need them just to buy other people's horses. No. That's a mistake that a lot of these people make when, when people who enjoy racing and want to go racing, want to win nice races, then turn into breeders and traders. That's not good news for the people whose livings really do rely on this sort of money coming into the sport.
Yeah. Whoever was the author of the most influential book on trickle-down economics, which is much debated, of course, as a means of running a country, they got nothing on Jamie Osborne. But of course, if you want to see these horses at the races, you, as a punter, or as a lover of the horse, you want to see them properly in the paddock. Chris Cook, amongst others this week, the senior reporter from the Racing Post, has outlined this growing problem. You're just not seeing them for long enough. And it's getting worse and worse. Why can't you get your horses in the paddock in timely fashion so people can have a look at them?
Well, I read what Rafe said yesterday, and obviously...
Oh, Rafe Beckett's talked about this as well.
Yeah, whatever Rafe says, I would actually have a contrary view anyhow, because I enjoy arguing with him. But I'm not sure there is a problem.
There is.
Is there?
Yeah.
So, well, I've missed it then, because... I mean, certainly I've never been on a racecourse when I've seen a horse not go in the paddock.
No. So I was...
Rafe said there were 2 horses one day at Sandown, neither of which appeared in the paddock and one of which won. Is that happening very often?
I think it can happen. And the one thing you certainly don't see at Sandown anymore is horses using the pre-parade ring.
There's less and less of that because more of us are saddling in the stables.
Why?
Because I think your horse will remain calmer during that time. A lot of them saddling boxes are, I think, look, Aidan saddles in the middle of the paddock. I actually have always thought the saddling boxes were dangerous. Mm-hmm. Horses kick out, they hit that back wall. God only knows what damage you can do. There are some horses that, so for example, Uzo, who's, 8 years old, if we do more than one lap of the paddock with him, he completely fries. He's just a sort of fruity old horse. And so we always get dispensation with him just to do one lap and out. I think there are bigger problems in racing than this. And,
Is customer engagement, though, not one of the very biggest? And this is one of the most crucial ways that customers can be engaged.
What proportion of the racegoers go down to the paddock and look at these horses and make their decisions about gambling based on that.
More would if they were in there, if it was more of a thing. I think it's the law of ever diminishing returns. This,
and it's not. I think this is. I don't think this is as big a problem as everybody is making.
You don't think it's as big a talking point as we're making it?
No.
So, but a Goodwood earlier in the week, I was actually,
especially as Ray thinks it is.
I want to credit Goodwood for managing to get a meeting on when the entirety of Chichester was in a power cut, and they had a massive concert on after racing. I mean, how the hell they did that, I do not know, but it was an amazing bit of. You know, we talk slag off racecourses all the time, but it was unbelievable bit of logistical masterminding from Ed Arkle and his team to get that thing on. Anyway, two-thirds of the way through the car, we went down to the paddock to talk about the horses. There's 2 out of the 7 or 8 runners in the paddock. Half the others are already saddled, walking around the pre-parade ring where nobody can see them. And they're not saying to them, come on, in you come.
Okay.
And so they come in, and they go. They've literally the last one's walked in. The bell's gone. The jockeys are on. The jockeys shouldn't be in the in the paddock before the horses.
Doesn't have
That's
very
nonsense, isn't it?
I
don't think care, do you?
No,
you
don't.
don't.
I think there are so many other things to worry about in the sport.
I just think it's a big part of this expression, customer engagement. And even if they're not going to the paddock to make their assessments, people come to the races to be able to see the horses and actually get pretty close to them and enjoy that whole experience. So I think it is an important thing, and you should be doing at least a circuit. And the other thing is, in the same way as the start is so important as the performance is about from the start to the finish, but it's the bits going up to it as well. So it's part of a performance of a horse.
I was under the impression that the BHA had this fairly well regulated.
Well,
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
You know. But I'm not sure it's being. Maybe it's just time. Maybe the tracks can't run.
We're trying to talk out election impact, I think.
What will be the impact of the election on horse racing? Well, in terms of government policy, Cornelius, maybe not all that much. But in terms of
the most crucial thing facing racing at the moment,
loss of friends, isn't it?
Well, I think loss of friends, but also the whole, all the things that have been going on around the Gambling Act in recent years. If there's a change of government,
when there's a change of government,
when whatever you want to call it, there is after July the 5th, even if there's the same government, the fact is everyone's going to have to reorganise, etc. So we're talking about the Gambling Act and the affordability checks and all that work. It's still there and it's still happened, but the decisions on it are going to be further down the road, aren't they? So surely that's the biggest thing. In terms of racing's friends, well, Dido Harding's just had a mention as she's about to take over as the chairman, the senior steward of the Jockey Club. Clearly, for the last 14 years, she was in a position to pick up the phone and ring important people. Presumably, that's not going to be quite the same in the future. Racing's going to have to work hard on knowing the right people to talk to within the corridors of power, and it's been accused, hasn't it, by some people of not being as good at looking ahead and trying to make friends in the Labour corridors of power as it should have been.
I can't really remember whether there was this sort of conversation in this sport prior to 1997, but then again, I can't remember horse racing being in a position where it felt that it had sufficiently senior contacts in high places to be able to pick up the phone and exert influence. Not that I think that's actually done them any great favours in recent weeks.
No, I think the biggest impact of the election is going to be what happens to the economy, because a business like mine, it will track the state of the national economy. Most of my business is domestic, and if taxation is going to rise and people are going to have less confidence in the government, well, less confidence or less confidence in the impact on the economy, then people tend to sit on their hands a little bit and don't have as much money to spend on this sport.
But if there's going to be more stability, and there's been a lack of stability in the world in the last 4 or 5 years, but if there is a Labour government with a big majority, there will be more stability, and that will give probably a boost to the economy, won't it?
Will it? I don't know. Does anyone know?
I'm getting the hurry up in my ear. International runners, we did touch on this earlier, so we only need to gloss this because Nick Smith's coming in a minute, but the idea that you can get major, important participants from far afield to race, this isn't just an Ascot thing, I think Nick will say this in a bit, but it's about these big summer showpieces, and have we got this little tiny window where we kind of dominate from June to August here and in Europe. Is there anything we can do to make that a little more interesting internationally?
Well, I mean, Nick can answer the question, how much incentive do they put in place or financial help do they put in place to get the big runners? Obviously, when we go abroad, most of the time we're not getting any financial help, but for some of the races we do. So you've got to dangle a carrot somewhere, and if it is important to our betting turnover and the world pool and everything that we have international runners, if it impacts enormously on, say, the world pool turnover in Hong Kong, then potentially we need to be making things smoother for these horses to come.
And if you get a Japanese runner, suddenly the pool's open in Japan, and away you go.
Yeah.
So the races are to work really hard on the Prince of Wales' stakes, and there are £2 million races, aren't there, at Royal Ascot this year? I think prize money is 10 million. £1 million Prince of Wales, £1 million Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee Stakes, to work really hard on the Sussex Stakes, King George, and the Juddmonte International.
Yeah, and I think you'd find an appetite there. More on that from Nick Smith in a few moments' time when he joins us. To be honest, having a winner at Royal Ascot is about the only thing that Harriet Graham hasn't done in her illustrious career. She managed to direct TV programmes, train horses, and goodness knows what else. She's got a well-deserved retirement, and hopefully a long and happy one now. And Victor Dartnell's also calling time on his training career.
And they have been around quite a long time. They've been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt. But Victor coming up with some very interesting quotes just about how hard it is if you're not one of the high-profile people in the sort of big racing centres. He's been Exmoor based, so in Devon, quite a long way to go everywhere, bar Exeter and Newton Abbot and maybe Taunton. And the fact is that staffing is very hard. People are riding at different stables. He's found himself not the high priority for riding out, and he's found himself, and he's a certain age now in his 70s, having to just work morning, noon and night, and ultimately the alternative attraction of children and grandchildren and sitting back and taking a deep breath occasionally is a bit more attractive. So he's going, having been a staple part of...
it's a refreshingly normal perspective, that, isn't it? I've had quite a long career. Now I'm going to retire.
Well, there are lots of people,
my grandchildren.
Fun enough, we were talking
you
about
often hear in horse racing.
Jamie and I were talking about it earlier on. It's what floats your boat, really, isn't it? Well, and obviously, it's no longer floating his.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 12, 24 months there are a lot more people that decide that the training racehorse isn't the business for them. It's increasingly more difficult to balance the books. And it's an awful, it's if you want to work-life balance, don't do this job.
But your work becomes your life, doesn't it?
Your work is your life.
Some of it is joyous as well.
Some of it is joyous, but you have to have that form of obsession where work-life balance just doesn't become a part of it, and you have to accept that you're running a fairly ordinary business.
The beauty of horse racing is that it intersects with so many other walks of life, so many other sports as well, and the rugby league legend Rob Burrow had his part to play in this sport, most notably in the last few years when he was living with motor neurone disease, and he died this week. And some of the tributes to him have been really extraordinary, Cornelius. I was never fortunate enough to meet him, but obviously everyone has seen what he's done and the impact he's had. Speaking to Paul Hannigan earlier in the week, I mean, quite clear how moved he was.
And there was a horse that ran, or there is a horse that runs to raise money for him. This is a horse called Macaroni. And the horse, or Macaroon is it, whichever it is, it won a race last summer. And at the height of the fundraising project for Rob Burrow and for the struggle against motor neuron disease, and the reception the horse received, and Paul Hannigan riding it received when successful, was something that would not have been out of place at Cheltenham or Alaska or Big Day at York, something like that. So people really got behind the fundraising because they got behind Rob Burrow. And I think it is that thought, isn't it? He played for Leeds Rhinos, played rugby league, was a superstar for Leeds Rhinos. I think he played for the same team throughout his career. He was one of those great players who gained, in inverted commas, a sort of form of immortality as a sports person. He was the Leeds Rhino. And then, just to show what the world can throw at you, it's somebody like that has a challenge like motor neuron disease thrown at them. And so on the one hand, you've seen the images of him subsequently clearly very ill with his wife Lindsay and with his children, and visiting the horses and involved with the Good Racing company as well, and Paul Hannigan, Jed O'Keefe, another trainer who supported him. And the two contrasts have really tugged at heartstrings. And he has done an absolutely immeasurable amount to raise awareness of motor neuron disease, which is one of those conditions which is quite prevalent in our society and is relatively little known about it.
Rob Burrow, who died this week. Those were this week's talking points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.